Hi class, welcome to lesson number 38. We've been talking a lot about macroeconomics for a couple lessons now, and right now we're getting into money and banking. But before we do, as usual, we talk about our homework question. Our homework question from last time talked about supply side economics, and they talked about how we can use the aggregate supply instead of the aggregate demand to fix the economy. Right? And the question was, how do you use the taxes, right? How do you use taxes to fix the economy? And the idea was that if my taxes, for instance, come down, let me use this side of the board. My taxes come down, right? The idea is that you have more disposable income, okay? More disposable income. And that disposable income translates to higher savings, okay? This higher savings, right? Higher savings. You as a consumer, you and I, what we do with this higher savings is we go to our bank, right? Bank of America, whatever it is, wherever you live in the world, right? Savings goes up, okay? And what this translates to is that banks have more money, okay? If banks have more money, right? They get more money, they tend to loan it out to people because they're only required to have money in reserves only a little bit. Only a fraction of it is actually in reserves. What they can do for the rest of it is actually loan it out, and we'll talk about that a little later. But when banks basically say they want to loan it out, where this money goes into is a market called market for loanable funds, where all the money is loaned out. Okay, so we have a supply, we have a demand, like we do in any single market. Okay, and again, we're talking about the market for loanable funds. Remember that the demand is the investment demand. Okay, and the supply is obviously supply of the market of supply of loanable funds. Now, when our savings go up and banks get more money and they put in more money into the market for loanable funds, the supply shifts to the right, interest rates come down, and the amount of loaned funds actually increases. Pretty obvious and straightforward stuff. The part that's a little trickier to understand is that if my interest rates are small, if the interest rates go down, if they've decreased, it's cheaper to borrow money. So companies invest more. And when they do invest more, they invest in things like technology, which increase productivity, right? And they do things like making sure that our input prices come down, okay? Because we can make things a lot cheaper, okay? If we can use technology and be more productive. Okay, so if a thing like an input price can come down, right, what tends to happen is that my aggregate supply goes to the right. Remember that that's one of your cause for short-run shifts, okay, for the SRAS. So SRAS shifts to the right, okay, and this causes two things. My price level comes down and my RGDP goes to the right. Now, if the change is permanent, okay, what tends to happen is my long-run aggregate supply shifts out as well. So you're having a new rate of full employment, okay, and a higher output. This is a win-win situation because your RGDP increases and your price level drops versus the AD changes, which increases your RGDP but also increases your price level, okay? Now, who's right, who's wrong? The idea is to balance out the two and understand both, okay? So we've covered this for now. So let's move on to money and banking, okay? So let's start off with a pretty simple concept, money. Money, as you know it today, is quite different than what it was centuries ago, okay? If you lived in, let's say about 1,000 years ago, right? In early history, economics was not based off of paper currency. Instead, it was based off of a pretty simple system, and you probably have done this before. Imagine yourself when you were in third grade, okay, and you had lunch, and I'm sure all of you traded your lunches because for some reason your mom's lunch is not too appealing, okay? For some reason you wanted your friend's lunch, okay? So what we tend to do is that we tend to barter, okay? That means we exchange things, and this is how economics worked, okay, in the early part of our economic history. We used to work on the barter system, right? If you had, I don't know, a pretty cool sandwich and you wanted your friend's lunch, if your friend thought it was appealing enough and he thought it was an equal in weight, he would barter his lunch for yours, okay? So this is really difficult because you had to compare goods against each other, and it's really difficult, right? How do you compare soda against pizza? Okay, it's really difficult, and it's really difficult to be consistent because each one has its own taste, and each one thinks of weight and economic weight in a different way. So obviously that wasn't too efficient. We moved on to currency, right? And we started off with things like gold, right? Gold was awesome because gold was something tangible and you could understand its value. And that's how we kind of traded. We wanted gold coins, and a lot of different currencies worked under the gold coin format, right? And then we moved on to a paper currency, right? A paper currency, but it was actually backed by gold. It was actually backed currency backed by gold and other precious precious stones, right? So gold was the standard, which we backed our currency. But then after a while, we got to this current system, which we now know as fiat money. Okay, fiat money. And fiat money actually by itself has no intrinsic value. What does that mean? I'll explain it to you guys. Let me move over this side so you can see a little better. No intrinsic value. Okay, so fiat money by itself has no intrinsic value. So when I give, in the US, right, we have dollars, right? Now if you go to Great Britain, you have pounds. If you go to Europe, you have euros, right? Each country has its own kind of currency. So when I give $1 in the US, I go to the store and I want to buy a basic commodity like milk, okay? And I give the person $3, okay? It's paper, right? It has no intrinsic value. It's not made of gold, right? So how does that person accept that money? Well, you know, what if I'm just cheating them, right? What if that's not worth anything? So the way fiat money works is that the government, okay? The government, okay, is who guarantees the value of that currency, okay? So the government makes this fiat money legal tender, okay? So they say the United States government backs this currency, okay? And that's whose word you take. You say that the government backs this currency, this $3 is actually worth $3 and not anything less, right? In the good old days, what would actually happen is this gold was what served as the universal system, right? We were like, if the government did not back it, that's fine. I could melt the gold and it was actually worth something, okay? Cash does not work that way. It's backed by the government. Fiat money has no intrinsic value by itself, okay? So what is the advantage of fiat money? Okay, what is the advantage of having this? Why can't we stick to gold? I mean, it's great. I mean, if in case your economy crashes, right, you always have a precious stone. In fact, the gold is actually at a very high price now, right, in today's world because of what has happened to economics in the past couple of years. But that's a whole new topic. But let's talk about fiat currency and its advantages. Okay, so the advantages of fiat money. Okay. So fiat money is actually a great way to exchange things. So it's a great medium of exchange. Okay? Medium of exchange. Okay? What does that mean? Okay, imagine in the good old days when you used to barter, right? When you used to barter, why not good old days? Why not third grade lunch, right? You're bartering your sandwich for your friend's lunch because you thought it was cooler than yours, okay? So it's tough because you're trying to, move a sandwich, right? Now, what if you decided to keep that sandwich a month or so and then transfer it? No one's going to take that sandwich, right? Because it's probably moldy and in a Ziploc bag somewhere, right? So the point is that sandwich is only going to last for some time. So it's not a great medium of exchange, but the $3 that you can hold in your wallet actually holds for a long time, right? It's almost permanent, right? It's not gonna just mold away like your food, right? So what's gonna happen is that fiat money actually serves as a great medium of exchange, right? It's a great way to exchange for goods because you have something that is consistent, right? Right? And is easily recognizable by all people and actually lasts for a long time. On top of that, it's actually pretty efficient, okay? It's efficient because if you think about it, right? If you have a gold coin, all right? Now, carrying gold coin is also, physically, it's also a big problem, right? But also it's not readily acceptable as cash in a lot of places, and it's not as fast to move, right? Our economy today moves at, trillions of dollars, right? Literally in seconds electronically, okay? So fiat money is really easy to exchange because it's really fast and efficient, okay? Now, that being said, let's talk about the second point, and it's a great unit of exchange. I think we hit this a little bit, but not unit of exchange, excuse me, unit of account. I'm sorry, unit of account. What does this mean? Okay, so you have, when someone goes and measures themselves, their height or their weight, okay, we have standards in the world, right? Kilos, pounds if you're in the US, right? Or if you're measuring your height, okay? You have different ways of measuring yourself, right? Similarly, we measure money in a different way. And we use currency to measure our money, right? It's not the amount of sandwiches you can buy. It's not the amount of Ferraris you can get, okay? You can think of it in that way, but the point is that $1 million is actually $1 million, right? It's just your dollars are the unit of account, okay? So it provides a pretty universal way of thinking of measuring things in terms of money, okay? Whereas it's difficult, yeah, you used to have a system where, this particular item is worth 2 gold coins, that particular item is worth 20 gold coins, but again, not as efficient, not as universal, not as consistent. The currencies are much more easier to manage in terms of measuring, okay? Measurement becomes a lot easier, and it's a great unit of account, and that's why it's worked so great for us so far. Thirdly is it's a great way of storing value. Okay, great way of storing value. Imagine again that, I talked about a little bit about this when we said imagine storing food, but even think about gold, right? Think about gold. Let's say you have $100,000 in gold. Okay, moving that around, you got to be careful. You're thinking, okay, is my neighbor going to take it, right? So you just got to be careful. There's a lot of variables involved with storing gold, right? Storing currency is a lot easier. You have banks, okay? You can invest in funds, okay? It's a lot easier because these days it's mostly done electronically, right? No one has $100,000 of cash sitting around. Some people do, I guess. But mostly what people do is they put it in banks or they put it in funds. They put it in some sort of way of some sort of assets, right? That's pretty easily manageable. So storing value is actually much easier on a fiat currency. And that's why it's worked so great so far. Okay, now it doesn't mean that there are things wrong with it. Obviously, there are a lot of things wrong with it, but for the most part, there are a lot of great things that come out of fiat currency. Okay, we talked a little bit about time value of money before in our last class. We said that as time progresses, money does lose its value. So keep that in mind. And with that being said, let's talk about two concepts such as future value and present value. Okay, so we talked about time value of money. I said that the dollar that's worth today is worth more than the dollar that's worth tomorrow, right? Dollar that's there tomorrow, right? So if you give me $1 today and you ask me, Venkat, you can either have the dollar today or you can have the dollar tomorrow. I will take the dollar today because there's inflation, right? And I can invest that dollar in different things. I can invest in a bank account. I can invest it in a mutual fund, whatever it is, obviously. Well, dollar's not enough, but you get the point, right? You get the point that dollar today is worth more than dollar tomorrow. Just because you're counting in for inflation, you're thinking about where could I invest it and make more money, okay? Rather than it just sitting there. So what is future value, right? Future value just asks the question, what or how much future value, right? How much is something worth? Something worth X days, years from now, okay? Into the future. from now. Okay? So that's what future value asks. Okay? So if I have $1 today, right, and you ask me to go in 5 years, right, what is that dollar worth, right? A pretty good question, okay? And I told you when I explained to you how we calculate, okay, well think about, okay, if you want $1 today, $1 tomorrow, why would you want $1 today? I said, well, you can put it in a bank account and you can earn interest, right? So interest rates play a huge part in understanding and calculating future value, okay? Calculating future value. And obviously, if you go a little more advanced, you can also count in for inflation, okay? But the point is that future value is based off of interest rates. It's based off of interest rates, okay? So mathematically speaking, the way we've calculated future value is that future value is equivalent to the present value, right? Present value, so this dollar, okay? Times the times 1 plus the interest rate, R, okay? To the exponent T stands for time. What do I mean by that? So the future value, okay, of this $1, okay, in 5 years, okay, so present value is $1, okay, then you times it by 1 plus the interest rate. Let's say the interest rate is at 10%, okay, 10%, right? So 1 plus 0.1, okay, 1 plus 0.1 to the T, which is 5 years, okay, so 5, all right? So my future value of this dollar, okay, is this number right here, okay? So if I calculate this, I'm going to get a number bigger than 1, right? Because the point is that we've talked about this. We said that, well, if you put in a bank account, how much are you going to get? So this factors in that idea of the fact that you'll be earning 10% interest rate in a bank, right? So if you want the same dollar in 5 years, you know, you'll get this amount, okay? You'll get this amount. So if you plug that in, you'll get the future value of $1 in 5 years, considering 10% as the interest rate. Now, if you use the same formula, you can also figure out the present value, right? Just flip the variables, right? Do some basic algebra, and you get the fact that present value, right, is equivalent to future value over 1 plus R, which is the interest rate, to T, right? So this way, if you have the future value, let's say you have $1 in the future, right? And the interest rate is 10%, right? And you want to know $1 in 5 years, what is it worth today, right? You can plug in this number and you'll get the present value of the dollar today, $1 in 5 years today, right? And it's going to be worth less than $1 for obvious reasons, okay? So that's present value and future value for you, okay? That being said, let's get into money, okay? Let's get into money. We've talked about money a little bit. We've talked about fiat money. We've talked about the present value of money, the future value of money. We've talked about the time value of money. So what are we talking about when it comes to money now? And we're going to talk about money supply. Okay, money supply. Money supply is by the federal government, the Federal Reserve, is sectioned off into 3 different sections. It's M1, M2, and M3. This is the way the Federal Reserve classifies our money supply, okay? And why do they do that? Well, for a couple of different reasons. They want to understand how liquid your cash is, right? The word, so what is liquid, okay? Right? Liquid, you know, liquids, when you think about it, you're thinking water, soda, whatnot. But liquid is the idea, right? How readily available, right? How readily available, or right, how readily available is your asset. Okay, let's think about this. All right, we have you have $1 million. Okay, you have $1 million, and out of this 1 million, okay, you have about $500,000. Okay, in a 10-year, okay, in a 10-year deposit, time deposit, right? 10-year deposit, and it makes you good money. It makes you 10% interest rate. Okay, So you've locked this up for 10 years, earning 10% a year, okay? $500,000 of it is gone. Okay. Out of the other $500,000 that you have left over, okay, you bought a house for $250,000, $250K into a house, okay, right? So you have so you spent, till now you have $500K in a 10-year deposit, you have a $250,000 house, okay? So what do you do with the other $250,000? Well, you have $200,000. We've talked a little bit about Ferrari, so you have a Ferrari, okay? And then the $50,000 is cash, okay? So liquidity asks you the question, how readily available is my asset, okay? What does that mean? It means how easily can I realize the value of this, okay? So if I want to go, let's take it this way. If I want to go to the Caribbean tomorrow, okay, and it costs me, I don't know how much ever money it is, how readily can I have my assets to that I want to enjoy, right? How readily can I use these assets, okay, and enjoy, right? So obviously, this is not as liquid, right? Because if I want to go to the Caribbean tomorrow, right, and it costs me $500,000 and I want this $500,000 from here, okay, I cannot use this because this is locked in a 10-year deposit. And if I have to take this $500,000 out, I have to pay a penalty, right? Because these people are using probably this money to loan it out to someone else, right? So I pay a penalty and I lose a lot of money. So this is not that liquid, right? My house I have to sell, and that might take a lot of time, right? Depending on where you live, right? That might take a month or so to sell. Ferrari at the same time, right? Why would you want to sell a Ferrari? But anyways, point is that selling a Ferrari might take 2 weeks, so not that liquid either, right? So cash is really the easiest you can do, right? Because you can do electronic transfer, you pay the hotel with your credit card, and you just use this cash to pay. So the cash is the most liquid, okay? Not as liquid, right? So if you go from not so liquid to the most liquid, cash is the most liquid, right? So M1, M2, M3 are arranged in terms of liquidity, okay? Are arranged in terms of liquidity, starting from the most liquid, okay? So M1 is the most liquid, to M3, which is the least liquid, okay? Does that make sense? So M1, M2, M3 are ways to section off the money supply, okay, and classify it in terms of liquidity, okay? So now let's get into what is actually included in M1, M2, and M3. Let me go ahead and erase this. So if you think about, it's pretty easy to think about it. What's the most liquid? It's cash. So obviously M1 should include cash, right? So let's start with that idea. So M1 includes cash, has coins, right? Checks, anything that's basically readily available, and also checking deposits, right? Checking deposits, because you can take that money out without any penalty, okay? So remember, I'm going this way from the most liquid to the least liquid, okay? Least liquid. All right, let's talk about M2. M2 includes M1, okay? And on top of that, saving deposits, because sometimes people have minimum deposits required in there, and you earn interest on that, so you might have to factor that out, okay? Factor that in, excuse me. And then you have small time deposits, okay? So small time deposits, and that's usually under $100,000, okay? Under $100,000, all right? And then you have the least liquid, M3, which has M1, M2, right? And then lastly, large deposits. Time deposits, by the way. These are time deposits. So they say, hey, you know what? You can lock away $100,000 for 5 years. We pay a fixed interest rate of, like, let's say 8%, okay? So this is large deposits, okay? So these are again, large time deposits over $100,000, okay? Greater than 100K. So this is the way that the Federal Reserve talks about money supply, M1, M2, and M3. And in most scenarios, they talk about M1 because it's readily available in terms of money supply, okay? So when we talk about money supply, in general, we talk about M1, okay? M1. But know about M2 and M3. And I can guarantee you this might be a question on the test. So really know what M1, M2, M3 is, okay? And if you can arrange it in terms of liquidity, it becomes much easier for you to understand, all right? So there's M1, M2, and M3. Now what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about money supply and money demand, okay? So we talked about money supply. We talked about the fact that they classified M1, M2, and M3. We talked about how liquid things are. Let's talk about money demand, all right? So money demand, we talk in the market for loanable funds, and don't get that confused with the next thing we're going to talk about after money demand, which is money market. Don't get yourself confused with investment demand and money demand, okay? Investment demand is the amount that is demanded by the firms for their investment, okay? Money demand is the demand for money in general, okay? So it's a lot more inclusive, all right? So let's think about money demand. And money demand falls into two categories. Falls into transactional demand and then you have, on the other side, you have asset demand. Okay? So what are these two? Transactional demand basically says, every day when you go out there, right, you're spending money. You're either buying lunch, you're buying groceries, you're buying bread, you're buying food, whatever it is, right? You're having an amount of transactions. And transactional demand basically states that higher the GDP, right, the higher the transactional demand. Transactional demand. All right? So why is that true? Well, think about it. If, let's say on average, people have transactions twice a day, okay? They buy lunch and dinner. And let's say you live in a developing country, and let's say you live in a developed country, okay? So developed country generally obviously has a higher GDP than the developing country, okay? So what tends to happen is that for the same amount of GDP per capita, right, between like $40,000 in a developed country and $4,000, right? If you have two transactions, the amount that's demanded is obviously much, much bigger in a developed country, okay? So that is transactional demand for you, okay? On the other side is an asset demand. Asset demand basically says, how much money do I want to have in terms of money, right, sitting, okay? So if you have $1,000 and you have the choice between keeping it in your closet, okay, or keeping it in a bank, what does it depend on? It depends on the sort of interest rates you're getting, right? As the interest rates rise, the opportunity cost, we talked about opportunity cost in microeconomics, right? The opportunity cost, the OPP cost, okay, of holding that money in your closet increases, right? Because if you put that $1,000 instead of a closet in a bank, you start to make more money, right? If the interest rates are going up, your opportunity cost is also going up, okay? Now, how do you relate this back to asset demand? Asset demand basically is relative, right, to this opportunity cost, okay? So if this opportunity cost is low, you're going to keep it in assets, like, you're just going to keep it in your closet, okay? The asset demand is going to be low if the opportunity cost is high. The opportunity cost is low, the asset demand is going to be high. The point is, transaction demand plus asset demand form your total money demand, okay? Your total money demand, all right? And for that reason, when these two come together, your graph for your money demand is downward sloping. Now, in the next class, I'm going to have to draw the money market. But just to give you a preview, your money demand is pretty much like all of the graphs you've seen. It's downward sloping, right? And your money supply is not upward sloping, but rather is vertical, okay? Kind of like your LRAS, okay? Because money supply is constant, okay? Money supply is constant. It does not change, okay, depending on your nominal interest rate or your money, okay, which is your X and Y axis, all right? But all of this I will explain in the next class. For now, let's review what we've gone over, okay? Mostly we've gone over money, okay? We've talked about fiat money. We've talked about the future value of money, the present value of money. We talked about the supply of money, talked about M1, M2, M3, how liquid things are, what's in it. We've talked about money demand, transactional, and asset, okay? And now we're going to move on to money market in the next lesson. Before I do, I want you guys to talk about the supply of money. I want you guys to talk about, the homework question is going to be about M1, M2, and M3. So arrange me M1, M2, and M3 in its form of liquidity from its least liquid to most liquid, and tell me what's in M1, M2, and M3. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you guys in the next class. Thank you.